Enemy Public, I saw your thing on YouTube, man. Keep doing your thing, bro.
Get your copy of Fire. It's definitely a must-read. If you enjoy hood books, this one is it. Just like the title of the book, it's officially Fire. Get it on Amazon, paperback or Kindle.
Peace. This is the Enemy's Public, and I am Bro.Nasir. This evening, the discussion is agents, confidential informants. They're who we least suspect. Now, I put a post in the community probably about a week or so ago that says we must be very mindful of who we allow to serve as the vanguard of our communities. They are very charismatic and articulate speakers. They smile in our face and will sometime go out their way to do acts of kindness. They avail themselves and act as if they are most reliable. They will also rise to official rank among our organizations. All the while, he or she are confidential informants working on behalf of our enemies, serving to the detriment of our people. But be mindful that they are very patient and will go deep undercover to accomplish their goals and get their desired effect. It's who we least suspect. Now we're going to go over a few of these confidential informants and agents. They were in our organizations and they served to our detriment, and some of the organizations were destroyed and people actually died as a result of some of these confidential informants and the work that they did serving to our detriment, yet on behalf of the United States federal agencies. Now, some of these brothers were set up and some of these brothers got in trouble and made a deal with the federal government to keep themselves out of trouble. Now, again, we must be mindful that these agencies and the people, peace to the brother Marco Power. Salute, thank you for tapping in. These people are very wicked and conniving and sneaky, and they use and abuse their perceived power that they have to get their desired results. Now, I want to share my screen. I'm going to do the narrative as I go on with the presentation. Now, first, we're going to talk about the man who armed the Panther Party. He sold them the guns. All along, he was a confidential informant. That's why I say when people come to us asking us, how could they help us? We have to vet them. We just can't allow people to come into our organizations. These new friends, these new people, we have to watch them on a protracted period. If not, we're going to fall a victim every single time.
We want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of black people.
Well, perhaps more than anything else, the Black Panthers stood for the right of black people to defend themselves against white violence, even if it meant carrying weapons and using them in self-defense. But it also brought violent conflict with police. And by 1969, at least 28 Panthers had been killed in shootouts with police. Not many people know that the Panthers got some of their first weapons from a man named Richard Aoki. And nobody knew that Aoki was an informant for the FBI. A former FBI agent had heard that I was doing research.
To my brother Bronx Flat Power God, thanks for
His
tapping
name was
in.
Bernie Threadgill. And he says, hey, I know that guy. And he said, Aoki was my informant. I developed him.
Oh, yeah, he was a character. He said, I don't have any interest in communism. And I said, well, why don't you just go to some of the meetings and tell me who was there and what they talked about. So one thing led to another, and he became a real good informant.
Well, I had never heard of Richard Aoki before Bernie Threadgill told me about him. So I started to research who was Richard Aoki. Aoki was a prominent activist in the San Francisco Bay Area during the 60s.
Definitely, Richard was someone who looked at things politically. The impression I got was basically, if you become his friend, he's like your friend for life, And he was like that with most people,
He had been very involved in the Third World Liberation Front strike at Berkeley in 1969. He was one of the most militant leaders of that strike. Aoki had also been involved in a group called the Asian American Political Alliance, one of the first Asian activist groups in the country. He'd also had a connection with the Black Panthers. Aoki was head of the Berkeley chapter of the Panthers and later became a field marshal in the Panthers. And it was known that he had given the Black Panthers guns. I knew from my research that he was a very smart and complex person. He had a fascinating history. His family was interned during World War II. He'd grown up in West Oakland in a very rough neighborhood, predominantly
Salute
black
to my brother
and
Dre
impoverished
Cobb's
neighborhood.
music. Thanks
He
for tapping
was part
in,
of
brother.
the gang. He was involved in a lot of petty crimes. Co-valedictorian in his junior high school. When he was in the Army, he became a firearms expert. So I was really curious to know about this other side of his life.
I'm wondering if you remember a guy named Bernie Threadgill?
Bernie Threadgill?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
What I was told in my research that during this period of time you actually worked for the FBI.
They tell you that?
Bernie told me that.
He did?
He did.
Oh, that's interesting.
Informants were used when I was in the FBI. An informant would report on the inner workings of an organization. They can keep you up to date on the thinking of the leadership of the organization, whether it's going this way, that way. Someone like Aoki is perfect to be in a Black Panther Party because I understand he's Japanese. Hey, nobody's going to guess. He's in the Black Panther Party. Nobody's going to guess that he might be an informant.
Through his involvement in the socialist groups, Aoki established his political credentials and became known to other activists in the Bay Area. Aoki was a student at Merritt College, and that's where he met Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, who would go on to found the Black Panther Party. The Panthers at that time were very concerned about police brutality in Oakland. They wanted to end police brutality. And they had an idea that one way to do that would be community patrols of the police. And in these community patrols, members of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, if they saw police interacting with citizens,
There would be a Black Panther present with a camera and also an unloaded shotgun. The goal of that was to be an eyewitness to prevent any possibility of police brutality.
but they needed guns in order to do these patrols. So they went to Richard Aoki. We went to a third world brother we knew, a Japanese radical cat. He had guns. We told him that we wanted those guns to begin to institutionalize and let Black people know that we have to defend ourselves, as Malcolm X said we must. And Aoki did. He provided not only weapons, but weapons training. Threadgill had given me a detailed account of how he recruited Aoki as an informant, but I wanted to know more.
It's always who we least suspect would be a confidential informant. Now, sometimes we align ourselves with people who we think have a common enemy, and this person is an actual agent, and we have to be mindful of these people who are overly ready to do acts of kindness. I'll do this, I'll do that. We have to be mindful. And not only that, we have to watch people. I always say this, watch people on a protracted period and vet them to see what they're about. And we have to have like investigators on our side to make sure that we're not bringing an informant into the rank and file.
In reviewing the records, there was a list of informants. Most of their names were blacked out, but for some reason, Richard Aoki's name had not been blacked out, and he was listed in the report as informant T2. Why was he arming the Panthers, and was the FBI involved in it? Under J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI had a secret operation called COINTELPRO, an acronym for Counterintelligence Program.
Hoover was very anxious to.
This is a term that some of our people should have never actually heard without being acquainted with what the term means. We are so quick to put this on each other without knowing what it means. Now, someone who's a part of a counterintelligence program or a agent provocateur, the key word is to provoke us. And, we have to be mindful of this person saying or suggesting that we should do something that makes absolutely no sense. When someone tried to provoke you or someone tried to get you, okay, maybe we have some brothers on the other side of town, or this person suggested you do something against the law, you have to really be mindful of that person and watch that person, because that person may be an agent trying to jam the whole organization up.
To go after the Black Panther Party. The goal of the FBI was to, first of all, neutralize them.
Techniques ranged from sending false letters or planting negative news stories to trying to foment violence between the Panthers and other groups. The FBI also used informants as part of its COINTELPRO operation.
When Richard passed away, he had in his apartment 2 uniforms neatly pressed.
Isn't it ironic? Once someone is found out to be a confidential informant, they end up committing suicide, which is something I don't believe. What I believe is that you will not be a tool of the federal government or a tool of white supremacy and collect dust in a shed. My sentiment is they always break their tools when they're done with them. So he and others who end up, after they do some type of interview and everybody know they're a confidential informant now, all of a sudden they end up dead. I don't buy it.
In his apartment, and one uniform was the Black Panther uniform. The other uniform that he had laid out and neatly pressed was his Army uniform. You know,
The FBI had released about 1,900 pages on various organizations that Aoki had been involved with, but it claimed it had no files on Richard Aoki himself. This was very strange because Aoki was a major political activist.
Aoki wouldn't even have to be a member of the party if he just knew Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, and he went out to lunch with them every day. They would have a main file, but to say they don't have a main file is ludicrous.
In my opinion, the FBI has a responsibility to the community to give a full account.
They don't have a file on him because they don't want to be tied to him not being around anymore. So if they had a file on him and something happened to him, it's going to tie whoever that agent is to this confidential informant.
Of what its relationship with Richard Aoki was, especially because Aoki played such an important role in arming the Black Panthers. One of the things I learned in my research is that Richard had actually worked for the FBI.
Oh, how was that?
Well, he never mentioned this
No.
to you?
I mean, that's like a big surprise to me, you know, in terms of, I don't think I was ever heard any information, you know, as far as, you know, him even talking to the FBI. Yeah. So that's kind of a shocking thing for me to hear. Yeah. He pretty much compartmentalizes all his different parts of his life. You know, he has friends from this period, friends from that period, and then the you know, Asian American movement and the World Strike period. You know.
Am I wrong?
I think you are.
Yeah. So would you say it's untrue that you ever worked with the FBI or got paid by the FBI?
I would say it.
And I'm trying to understand the complexities about it, and I think
it is complex.
I believe it is, and
layer upon layer.
Now we're going to go to The Psychology of a Traitor, a breakdown of William O'Neill. I'm not going to play all of this because
Be a little bit more sophisticated than a gang.
I'm not going to play it all because it's lengthy, but I'm going to play enough of it to do something. Go into some of the breakdown of William O'Neill.
Decided to leave the state to go visit a relative in another state, and we had an accident out of state. And prior to the accident, we walked in a pool hall and was shooting pool. And at the door, you had to register your phone number and address. And we wrote down our names and phone numbers, then went and shot a game of pool, and then came out and had an accident. We fled the accident on foot. Messed around in the city a while, and then caught a bus back to Chicago. And about 3-4 months later, I got a call from this FBI agent by the name of Roy Mitchell. And he told me that he knew what I had done. And we went around a couple of times, and he said something like, well, there's no need in you trying to bullshit me. I know you did it, but it's no big thing. He said, I'm sure we can work it out. And I think a few months passed before I heard from him again. And one day I got a call, and he told me that it was payback time. He said that I want you to go and see if you can join the Black Panther Party, and if you can, give me a call.
Can I just interrupt and have to start that part about joining the Panther Party? But tell me again how old you were, and that it was not he, but that it was an FBI agent?
I think I was about 18, 19 years old. And
now this guy gets into a accident and flee the scene and go back to Chicago. And an FBI agent calls him and have him infiltrate the Black Panther Party. And he rose to official rank and file. Actually, William O'Neill became head of security of the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party. He did all this because he didn't want to be held accountable for something he did that wasn't even all that, major. But he did all this because he was a punk.
And the FBI agent's name was Roy Mitchell. And he called me up on the phone and recanted.
Peace to Big Dog Philly OG. Thanks for tapping in.
The crime, pretty much. I tried to deny it, but he had the evidence, and he said basically it was no problem, that we could work it out, that I wasn't in any serious.
Greetings to Sharon Walker. Thanks for tapping in. I appreciate it.
Serious problems that he couldn't deal with. And a few months, 3 months maybe passed before he asked me to join the Black Panther Party.
Now, what did Mitchell ask you to do?
Well, he didn't give me any specific instructions at that point. He just said,
Can you say instead of he?
Roy said basically, just go and see if you can join the Black Panther Party. I understand they're recruiting Panther members. So why don't you go down to the office and see if you can join? If you get in, give me a call back. So the next day, I got on the bus and went down to the office of the Black Panther Party. It was located on Western and Madison. And walked in the office, about 3 or 4 Panthers in the office. And I think I was about the 5th member in the Chicago chapter to join. They had this big office building and up on the 2nd floor, they had about 5 or 6 offices. And very little personnel to run things. So positions, it was easy to get a position. So they appointed me as as a security captain. That was the first time I met Fred Hampton, and he was the chairman and the spokesman for the party, and Bobby Rush was the Minister of Defense. He was Huey P. Newton's deputy.
Just imagine, he helped them build the chapter. All along, he's a confidential informant.
Which was a top man in the state of Illinois at that time.
What did you think about the Panthers at that time? What framework did you understand them in? What did you thought about the civil rights movement? How did they fit into your understanding of politics and
I grew up in a middle class neighborhood, and I had very little idea of I was apolitical. The Panthers I had heard of only from a recent article, I think, that had occurred in the paper. Huey P. Newton had just been in a shootout with the Oakland Police Department, and one of them had died, and there was a lot of press about that. But prior to the articles I had read about Huey P. Newton, I knew nothing of the Black Panther Party. In fact, the day I joined, I was pretty sure it was just another gang, not unlike the Blackstone Rangers or the Cobras or something. I had no idea of anything about their politics.
what did you begin to learn as you did join, and what kind of information were you able to give back to Mitchell?
Well, almost immediately after I joined the Panthers, probably within 10 days, I began to realize that the Black Panther Party was a little bit more sophisticated than a gang. The orientation process, the attention they gave to the political climate around the country had me going there for a while. And at one point, well,
And also, if you can look at me.
yeah, okay. They had, I think the first set of reference books I saw inside the Black Panther Party was the selected works of Mao Zedong, which I had begun to associate with communism. And it wasn't too long thereafter that I started seeing books like the Manifesto, the Communist Manifesto of Karl Marx, and then the collected works of Lenin. And every night after the office would close, the Panthers would sit down and they would study these books. We'd go through political orientation. We would read certain paragraphs, and then Fred Hampton and Rush would explain to us, the new membership, basically what it meant and what was happening, and they drew parallels to what was going on in the past revolutions in the various countries, like, for instance, China or Russia, and it was drawing parallels to what was going on in the current political scene within the United States. So they were drawing associations between the revolutions in the communist countries, as I understood it, as to what was happening in the United States, and so I understood them to be a little bit more sophisticated than a gang. I expected that it would be weapons, and we would be out there doing turf battles with the local.
You would be correct, Sharon Walker. This is William O'Neill, the guy who got close to Fred Hampton and the members of the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party. He's the one who gave the FBI the diagram of where Fred Hampton would be sleeping, cooked the Panther Party members dinner the night Fred Hampton was assassinated, and spiked Fred Hampton's drink so he can be out, so he won't even be able to fight when they come through the door firing weapons at him.
The local gang members, but they weren't about that at all. They were into the political scene, the war in Vietnam, Richard Nixon, and specifically freeing Huey. That was the thing.
Now, you would, I assume, report this information back to Mitchell. Did he have a response? Did he react to this?
Well, initially, Agent Mitchell requested very little information from me. It was a one-way street for probably about 6 months. I think he was in every meeting that I had with him. He listened more than he asked questions. The typical meeting would be, okay, what are they doing today? And then I would just tell him what was going on around the office in general conversation. He said, okay, and what are you doing? And then I'd tell him what I was doing, and then he'd make mental notes. Sometimes he took shorthand notes, and then we'd depart. He said, okay, just keep me informed. And so we had a very loose relationship at that point because the Panthers weren't too active militarily. Okay, they were politically organizing at that point. They were recruiting. At that point, the Panthers were trying to, they had speaking engagements at the different colleges and so forth. So we were in an organizing process. And there was very little criminal activity as I could determine what's going on. Very little to report to the FBI in my mind, because I felt like since
when there's no criminal activity to report to the FBI will send someone like William O'Neill to make something happen, to start beefs, or to suggest that we do something illegal in the organization. Perhaps like you may need some financial, help. He'll suggest that the brothers rob a bank or rob somebody or rob or some type of business. That's what these confidential informants do, or these agents do. A confidential informant is one thing that goes back and let the agency know what the organization is doing. But a agent will actually go back to the organization and suggest that they do something illegal.
The FBI was an investigative body investigating federal crimes. That crimes were what they were looking at, and so.
Tell me a little bit about how you felt about working for the FBI. What motivated you, and what ends you thought you were serving?
Well, in my community, the policemen it was the quickest way to gain respect. I think I grew up wanting to be a policeman, admiring and respecting policemen, although I always thought it was outside of my reach. My neighborhood was not unlike most people that grow up in Chicago. Most young people, we were very mischievous and did a lot of juvenile type, petty criminal type things. But stealing a car and all of a sudden having the FBI, having a case with the FBI that thought of really going to jail got my attention. And so when he asked me.
He stole a car, crashed it, after getting into a fight, fleeing a fight actually, got into a fight in a pool hall, fleeing, and he was called by the FBI, and he did all this what he did to what J. Edgar Hoover said, neutralize at least that chapter for now. Now I'm going to move on to Eugene Roberts, Malcolm X's bodyguard. I don't want to play all of this cup because it's almost an hour. I don't want to be all night with this.
Mr. Hoover, would you have any comment at this time? But Malcolm's message was not lost on one audience and one man in particular.
So far as the rank and file of the colored population is concerned, maybe some of them do not like the FBI.
In J. Edgar Hoover's day, the FBI got a little crazy on the subject of black people. They had Elijah Muhammad under surveillance for at least 20, 25 years. They had Malcolm under surveillance for most of his public life. When I say surveillance, I'm talking about wiretaps, I'm talking about room bugs, I'm talking about infiltrators.
You were an undercover agent for the police. He didn't know then.
No, he didn't.
And you got in close, very close. He trusted you.
I would say yes.
Gene Roberts got so close that he became Malcolm X's bodyguard, even though he was really an undercover cop. in the New York City Police Department. Your job was to gather intelligence, to gather information.
Yes.
And the Bureau's mission was to keep tabs on potentially violent people?
Yes.
Why was Malcolm X considered a potentially violent, if not in fact violent person?
Well, I guess at that point in time, society wasn't ready for Malcolm X. He was saying a lot of things that society didn't want to hear at that point in time. The week before he was killed, there was a meeting at the Audubon. And I saw what I thought, and I still think, was a dress rehearsal for Malcolm's impending assassination. I called the department the following morning, and I told them that I felt that this was as I put it, a dry run. And they told me that, okay, we'll pass it on and we'd take care of it. What they did with it, I really don't know.
I did not have a gun, but I tell you, I wished I had a gun. Because when I walked into the Ottoman barroom and seen nobody on the door, seen no one there, I became very upset. And I went directly, as I walked to the back of the room, I asked these, I said, what is this? And they said, this is his request. He told us not to put nobody on the door. I said, don't give me that. Don't give me that. I said, somebody in here is playing games.
And a commotion started. Two individuals.
And this guy right here, Eugene Roberts, also suggested that they don't search. He suggested that, he said that the people is not going to take that well being searched before they came into the event. And Malcolm went with it, knowing the climate and the atmosphere that he was in. He should have never let nobody put that in his head that it shouldn't be a search procedure in the event, especially the time he was living in. It makes no sense to me.
Individuals near the front got up and one of them hollered, get your hands out my pocket.
Malcolm said, all right, all right, all right, all right, all right. And all of a sudden, that's when the bullets start ringing.
I saw three individuals from the front get up and just started firing at him. They came running down the middle aisle toward the exit. I turned and went back, and two of them passed me. And I met the third.
Yes, and Eugene Roberts also gave Malcolm mouth-to-mouth resuscitation with bullet holes in his chest, which you shouldn't do when someone have bullet holes in their chest. He actually helped Malcolm die. He aided in the death of Malcolm by giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. He's not telling the whole truth.
Third individual, and just as he turned the fire at me, I turned sideways and hit him with a chair, and I knocked him down. I saw him scramble up, run out the door. I chased him out the door, at which time, when I got out, there was a crowd of people outside. They had him, and they were beating him. I turned around and went back in, and as I got to the stage, he was still laying there, and everybody was standing around. So at that time, I started giving him mouth-to-mouth, and he died right there on stage.
After I had taken the standard entrance exam for
how the FBI and the NYPD infiltrated Malcolm's organization.
And then one day they called 3 people I didn't know that were from Boise called me down to the old police headquarters, and they asked me some questions. What did I feel about certain things? And one of the final questions was, what did I feel about Malcolm X? And I said, I didn't know that much about the man. Then they told me, we want you to go up to 125th Street and 7th Avenue around the Teresa Hotel, hang around for a while, and get your face known. And so for about a week, I hung around 125th, chock full of nuts. And then after which, following week, they said, we want you to try to get into Malcolm's organization, which was in the Teresa Hotel. So my next visit, I go to Malcolm's office in the Teresa Hotel.
Pardon this
And I
footage
meet
and the
up with the
audio.
fellow, and
I know it's kind of
expressed the fact that I
distorted
wanted
and
to
low.
join the organization. He gave me a
It's kind of old though.
questionnaire form to fill out, which I did. And then I started attending meetings.
Gene Roberts, of course, identity as a guard for Malcolm, undercover guard, never came out for about 6 years after Malcolm's death, when he was a witness doing the same kind of work in what's called the Panther 21 trial here in New York, when 21 Black Panthers were accused of plots to dynamite Saks Fifth Avenue and the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens and so on.
And Eugene Roberts probably the one who put that in their head and suggested that they do it. That's what the agents do, and that's what the provocateurs and the confidential informants do. They'll go suggest that the organization do something illegal and then bust them for it. Now, he went from Malcolm X's organization to the Panther Party, infiltrating and neutralizing organizations that was vanguards of our community.
They were all acquitted after an 8-month trial, the longest trial, I think, in New York's history, criminal trial.
A Black person who takes a Black leader and weaves his way into his confidence and then betrays him or her, or any other one for that matter, is decidedly beneath contempt.
Yes.
So if Gene Roberts were a part of all this, the man himself is totally beneath contempt.
With Gene Roberts as a trusted bodyguard, the New York City police now had a man on the inside who could closely monitor the activities of the Muslim Mosque Incorporated, the OAAU, and the minister as well. In the cold, early morning hours of February 14, 1965, a Molotov cocktail smashed through a window of the house he shared with his pregnant wife and 4 young daughters. The minister and his family escaped unharmed through the flames and onto the lawn, where they saw the raging inferno destroy their home.
I stood in my underwear, bare feet, in the middle of my driveway with a gun in my hand for 45 minutes, waiting for the police or waiting for the fire department to come.
Having the threats, that's all I get is threats. I get not less than 6 or 7 threatening phone calls every day.
He found his family shelter at a friend's home, and the next day, he flew to Detroit to keep a speaking engagement.
Distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies. It isn't something that made me lose confidence in what I'm doing, because my wife understands, and I have children from this size on down, and even in their young age, they understand. I think they would rather have a father or brother, or whatever the situation may be, who will take a stand in the face of any kind of reaction from narrow-minded people, rather than to compromise and later on have to grow up in shame and in disgrace.
Monday night, February 15, 1965, while he was addressing an audience at the Audubon Ballroom, a disturbance in the audience distracted his bodyguards, pulling them from their assigned posts.
The dry run, as I felt it was, started.
If those men were trained correctly, when there's a disturbance, they don't leave their post. The ones who are in the detail of front rostrum is supposed to go to the minister and get the minister off stage. But they wasn't trained correctly. They ran away from Malcolm to a disturbance when it's somebody in the audience or standing in the aisles are supposed to handle that disturbance. But they left the stage, they left front rostrum. That makes no sense. Who trained them?
I was part of the front rostrum guards, the guards that stand in front of the stage. And to my right, or directly in front of
Front rostrum is supposed to get the minister or whoever speaking off the stage and take them away. That's what front rostrum does. They don't leave and run to a situation.
there was a commotion, a couple of chairs overturned. I noticed a individual walking down the middle of the middle aisle. I took a couple steps toward him, and he took a seat in the second row.
Elijah Muhammad has given the order to his followers to see that I am crippled or killed.
Now we're going to go to a deathbed letter of an officer saying that the NYPD.
We are peaceful people. We are loving people. We love everybody who loves us. But we don't love anybody who doesn't love us.
This week marks 56 years since civil rights activist Malcolm X was assassinated right here in New York City. For decades, there have been many questions around the circumstances of his death and whether the three men convicted of his murder were actually the people responsible. Well, at a news conference last Saturday, Malcolm X's daughter heard a letter for the very first time that they say is evidence that the NYPD and the FBI conspired to have their father assassinated. CBS This Morning Saturday co-host Michelle Miller explains what this could mean for Malcolm X's legacy.
White people don't realize how frustrated Negroes have become.
Malcolm X was a legendary orator, charismatic, controversial, revolutionary.
To lift the struggle for freedom of the Negro in this country from the level of civil rights to the level of human rights.
On February 21st, 1965, he was assassinated while giving a speech at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem. Now, 56 years later, a letter given to Malcolm X's daughters could hold proof the NYPD and the FBI conspired to have him killed.
I am relieved that I am able to share this truth with the world today.
Reginald Wood reads the words of his cousin, former undercover cop Raymond Wood, who died in November. He wrote that letter in 2011 to be released upon his death.
It was my assignment to draw the two men into a felonious federal crime so that they could be arrested by the FBI.
Those men were members of Malcolm X's security detail and were arrested days before his assassination.
There was no security to prevent the gunmen from coming into the building.
3 members of the Nation of Islam were convicted of the murder.
Malcolm's death never sat right with me.
On the heels of the 2020 Netflix documentary, Who Killed Malcolm X?, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office began a preliminary review last February. After the letter's release, it says their review remains active and ongoing. As for the NYPD and the FBI, they say they have turned over all their relevant records to the DA and will cooperate.
They're going to investigate themselves like they always do and find no wrongdoing, just like the CIA flooded our communities with crack. But they investigated themselves and found no wrongdoing.
CBS This Morning, Michelle Miller, New York.
First on CBS This Morning, Malcolm X's daughter, that's Ilyasa Shabazz, and civil rights attorney Ben Crump join us to discuss. Good to see you both. I want to start with you, Ilyasa, because I can't imagine what it was like for you as his daughter, Hearing those words for the first time on Saturday, what were your thoughts as you heard them?
Wow. Well, first, good morning, Gail. It's a pleasure to be here with you. When we first heard that letter, it made us think of our father, who was just in his 20s when he burst onto the scene of the civil rights movement, and 39 when he was gunned down, when he was assassinated in 1965. He gave the biggest critique of America, and he wanted America to live up to her promise of liberty and justice for all. And we have seen historically the injustice against Black Americans primarily. And my father worked diligently to ensure the end of this senseless brutality.
Were you surprised by the words? Were you surprised to hear what the officer said?
I can say I was surprised because I was caught off guard, but it's something that my family and many always wondered. But most importantly, we wanted to ensure that the truth is uncovered.
Mm-hmm. Ben Crump, I know that good to see you, Ben, and we should say you're not representing the family at this time, but I know the Wood family brought the letter to you in November. Why was it not revealed until last weekend?
Well, one of the things Reggie Wood wanted to know, Gail, when he came to me, what do I do with this? Do I turn it to the federal government, to the FBI? And the question was, would they simply just suppress it? As this had been a secret for 56 years that Ray Wood had carried under duress. He had been told that there would be personal harm to him and his family if he ever told people about the FBI and the NYPD conspiring to assassinate Malcolm X. And so, Gail, this is about restorative justice, trying to vindicate those who have been wrongfully convicted by Ray Wood, NYPD, and the FBI, people like Panther 21, including Tupac Shakur's mother, Afeni Shakur. Those two men who spent almost 3 decades in prison to keep Ray's secret, for trying to discredit civil rights leaders. And in Malcolm's case, and many believe in Fred Hampton and Martin Luther King's case, led to their deaths.
Yeah. Ilyasa, I'm curious, given what Mr. Crump just said about Officer Wood, the late Officer Wood, I'm very curious what you think of him today. On the one hand, he's written this letter, so the information is now out there. But on the other hand, he was part of it back then, and he was silent for so many years.
Well, listen.
That's the only credit he get. He didn't go to his deathbed, leaving it a secret. That's the only credit that I would give him. But he's a piece of crap also because he was involved in it, and he could have, he wanted to live his life. That's all I'm going to say. He wanted to live his life, and he gave it to them on his deathbed. And I don't think he would have done it if he wasn't emphatically going to die.
My parents' home was firebombed on Valentine's Eve as they both lay in bed asleep. A bomb was thrown in the nursery of their baby's room where my sisters and I slept. 1 week later, my mother witnessed this horrific assassination of her husband. She was a young woman with 4 babies and pregnant with twins. And I know that she was excited to walk into that Audubon ballroom that Sunday afternoon to see her husband. And she walked out shattered. She tended to his needs and opened his tie. And, in spite of all of this trauma that she endured, she raised her 6 daughters with love, kindness, joy. I just take my hat off to her.
To your mother, yes.
And if we can find out
the truth, we could find out the truth. Ilyasa, we don't have much time left. I know, Ben, you've called for a commission on this, but I'm curious, Ilyasa, about what do you think is the biggest misperception about your dad, and do you think his message is being perceived differently these days? Can you say it in a couple of
Well, I
sentences?
think now that, yes, I can. Young people were politicized this summer when they witnessed the death of George Floyd. I think that many people are now turning to Malcolm because they realize that Malcolm had a profound reaction to these horrific injustices that continue to occur even today.
All right, Ilyasa Sebastille, there are so many questions.
Now, this agent, this guy infiltrated.
Which came through about 2 years and 10.
He went around infiltrating organizations, different organizations. He's an FBI informant, describes infiltrating Black culture altogether. He went around organizations infiltrating them. Just listen.
10 months.
And so they threatened you with that?
Yes, they did.
Why didn't you stand up to that?
I called the probation office in Sacramento first. They told me a warrant was out for my arrest and that I was going to jail.
Did you have any particular fear of jail?
Yes. I don't like to be shut in. I have a very, very dark fear of being shut up anywhere.
How would they have known this?
The only way they could have known that is from my psychological profile when I went into military intelligence, which they take on all people that work in military intelligence.
So you bent and you decided to go to work for them?
Yes.
How would you say that most of those who are doing the same thing that you did have gotten into that behavior? The same way you did, they were coerced?
Coerced, pressure. Some can take it for, I think some might do it for the pay, for the feeling of power. It's a natural syndrome for a powerless person giving a pedestal where he can direct, or he can say, well, this man goes to jail or this man stays free. They get a feeling of security from it.
For the FBI, did you get an indoctrination or did you just start cold?
No, I got an indoctrination. It started off with camera surveillance, camera surveillance, electronic techniques of surveillance, shadowing, the obtaining of let's say letters, empty envelopes, instructions on how to go to somebody's garbage containers and pick out useful items. You'd be surprised at the things that they take out of a garbage can, by the way. I mean, anywhere from the leftover food from breakfast, just to know what this guy eats for breakfast, When they become interested in a person or a group of people, they try to find out as much as they possibly can, psychologically and academically and social-wise. Who do they run with? Do they go to certain nightclubs? Does this one have a sex hang-up? Is the man impudent? Anything that can be used later on.
How long was this indoctrination process?
It lasts anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks.
What is the most sophisticated equipment that you use as far as eavesdropping is concerned?
The video setup, and also I work with the new, I think it's called parabolic reflectors for sound pickup. Very interesting piece of equipment.
How is that used?
Okay, it reminds you of a disc. Have you ever seen those radioscopes?
Yeah.
You know how they're a disc and then there is a
cone behind it,
cone in the center, right?
Yeah.
Okay, these parabolic reflectors were just like that, except a smaller version, and you would point it in the direction of where you wanted to pick up the sound from.
And how far away can it pick up sound?
Oh, I think it was anywhere from the ones I use from 200 to 500 yards.
What?
Oh yeah,
distinct.
Right?
It's called a bionic ear. Whatever you point it at, you can hear everything that they're saying.
Very distinct. You could be in a building Like say we're here right now, okay? Okay, not the next building, but the building behind. Let's say it's a little bit taller. Okay, I could point that parabolic reflector from there to this window, and I could pick up. That's how good it was.
Through the window.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, the window didn't have to be open. The window didn't have to be open in the hall.
How does one go about tailing a person? Describe that. Is there a particular art? You say you have to be taught that.
Well, there is a particular art to it, but, you know, okay, let me state, number one, the easiest way is to get close to the person so you can run with it. You know, that's the best way. Okay, the second best way is a thing I've called trial and error observation, where you would go around and you would follow this guy, let's say, from a distance of anywhere from a half block to a block, as long as you can keep him in sight. And then you find out certain locales or certain places that this man goes to every day. Now, if you can get a set pattern of places that this man goes to every day, you got him down. You got him down. That's what they needed to know.
So after a couple of weeks, you were ready to go to work?
I wasn't ready, but I went to work, yeah.
Do you know if this indoctrination period is more sophisticated today?
Probably much more so sophisticated for the simple reason that they're probably more severe on them as far as rating is concerned. Simply because of all the disclosures that are being made against them. I think they're being very, very careful. And when they sink their hooks in, I think they're making sure that it is tight, airtight.
In your experience, did you ever see the FBI try to sway newspaper or media news?
Oh, hey, let me run this down to you. LA Times, man. I went over there and picked up press passes from certain people over there. Let me see. Some people that work for NBC
TV.
Yes, in Los Angeles, used to get press passes to the bureau and stuff. Fact is, we used to get some camera equipment from there.
So a lot of this news film was probably turned over to the FBI.
Oh, sure.
Was definitely turned over.
Oh, hey, they had a lot of reporters, and well, you know, it was that old game of one hand washes the other. Usually, an agent would prefer to meet the reporter on a one-on-one basis. You understand what I mean? Build a rapport with him. You know, go out to the press club, buy him a few drinks. You know, take him out to Hollywood Park. You know, for the races. You know, that kind of thing. Say, hey, Jim, you know, your paper's covering such and such, or your TV station's covering such.
This interview gets very deep. Very deep. Some of the things that he did in some of our organizations is ridiculous. It's a wonder that he lived to do this interview in 1980. Now, the guy that's interviewing him is Gil Noble from a program he used to do called Like It Is. And turns out he was a confidential informant himself.
Such and such. And yeah, I just like a little bit more information than I've been getting. I need it, you know, it would kind of help me, you know what I mean? A personal favor. And if you do something for me, maybe I can do something for you, you know, in the future. Like, you know, when we're about to break a case, you'll be the first to know, that kind of thing.
What kind of work did you end up doing as an undercover agent? Were you doing espionage work or informant work?
Informant work, and also what you would call illegal entries, selling of weapons, selling of explosives, arson.
You would sell weapons and explosives to these so-called radical groups that you were joining?
Yes.
All right. Where did you operate?
I was given a cover name, Ed Riggs. With that, I was also given a birth certificate stating that both my parents were, a birth certificate and a record for a Robert Riggs and a Mary Riggs who were deceased.
And you lost all of your true identity?
Yes.
And you operated in California?
California,
What cities in California?
Los Angeles, Oakland, San Francisco, Berkeley, Sacramento, Chino, San Bernardino, Santa Cruz.
Any other states since California?
Yeah. Chicago, Chicago, New York. Made 2 trips to Washington, D.C. Also, I better put in Seattle, Washington. That's very important, too.
How does the FBI coordinate this information? You were one of a number of agents who were doing this. How did they correlate and coordinate this flow of information? How many agents, let's start with that, how many agents were working in a given city like LA in the late 60s?
Jesus, we're talking about a lot of people. Like I said before, in the state, I would say 700 to 1,000. In Los Angeles, which was a large concentrated area of blacks, we're talking about anywhere from 300 to 400 people. San Francisco, probably the same thing. That's a large concentration of black people. Wherever there was a large concentration of blacks or a large concentration of minorities. Don't let me only say blacks, because we're talking about the Chicanos and we're talking about the Chinese too.
But among every ethnic group, there were ethnic groups of that group who could be recruited by the FBI to infiltrate their own.
Right.
Just want to get a sense of how much money American taxpayers were laying out for this kind of exercise. What was your salary?
When I started with the Bureau, I was making, $200 a week plus expenses. When I left the Bureau, I was making close to about $800 a week, and also some expenses too.
So it might run as high as $1,000 a week.
Yes, it's according to what assignments you were put on at the time.
And statewide, there were 750 agents.
700 to 1,000. It might have been more than 1,000 statewide. People are into a fantasy world when they believe that the Federal Bureau of Investigation finds out what it finds out through the method of scientific investigation, that the agents can just go out and they can plot a course and they can follow a man everywhere and they take notes and such. That's not the name of the game. The name of the game is find someone that is close to that man or can get close to that man or that group or whatever, and have him do the legwork.
So in other words, there obviously then would have to be more informants than agents.
Definitely.
What would the ratio be? 10 to 1?
I think every special agent usually has anywhere from 6 to 7 what I would call prime informants or agent provocateurs. And then also you have anywhere from 20 to 25 people per agent also that are not really what you would call the everyday informant or agent provocateur, meaning that that person is not on a steady payroll by the Bureau, but every once in a while they will go to that person for information.
What is your speculation on what recently happened in Miami? Would you suspect that there has been a number of agents or informants that have descended on Miami since that eruption?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And not only from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, too. You'll have people from military intelligence and the CIA, for the simple reason that they want to find out the CIA and the military intelligence people want to find out, is this anything connected with some kind of foreign agency? That's their prime objective. The Bureau wants to find out whether this was a organized type of mass movement that's going on. Are there leaders? Are there central people that started this? They want to find that out. Who was the one that was out there getting the group of people together and said, hey, let's go get this? They want to know that.
How would you tell a member of a community that they might be able to spot an informant. How is that possible? Can you spot one? Or what should one look for? Let's say someone in Liberty City.
Well, it's like this. Informants come in all sizes, colors, and attitudes. There is no definite way, unless you can get hold of his telephone bill, and if you can connect the number with a bureau office, then you got it. But
the fact that they're not working steady and yet are able to eat and get around doesn't mean anything.
Not so much in the black communities. That's one of the hard things, because there's such thing as hustling, and some people are known as good hustlers. So people don't tend to trip off of them. Hey, Blood, I don't know how Blood did it. Blood probably did. He robbed somebody.
It's always that the federal agency set the brother up after profiling him. Now, this brother here, and I say brother with quotes, not because he's a brother, he's a sellout, infiltrator, turncoat. He bought something that he needed in his field of work, something to do with media, and it was stolen. After the FBI agent talked to him about joining, because where they go to recruit is like college campuses, police departments. They go to all kind of different places. They might recruit somebody from the streets to do something stupid, but when it comes to gathering intelligence and getting deep like this guy was, it's like probably more than likely college campuses, media, places like that. They'll go and they'll find these agents, these confidential informants, and that's how they get them to work for them. Now, this guy, he bought something, turned out, put it this way, he bought something in his field. After he turned down the federal agent to work for him, his financial aid was turned off. More than likely, they made a phone call. His financial aid was turned off. So he went and he sold what he bought. He took it to a pawn shop and he was set up. He was straight up set up. And turns out that it was stolen and he's supposed to get probation. So the agent called him back and said, "Are you ready to work for me?" He said, "No, I'm not working for you." He said, "Well, I understand your situation. I can make it go away if you want." He said, "Well, I'm only getting like minor probation." He said, "No, it's federal probation." He called them and made it federal probation. And instead of handling his business or getting to the bottom of what happened, he decided to work for them.
Or hey man, he's selling some weed or whatever,
Would it necessarily have to be a new face in the community?
No. Fact is, they tend to shy away from that. What they try to do is get someone that's already situated. It's much easier. Much, much easier. If they have what they call a prime informant, one that has been trained, that knows how to get into the group. Say he's with another group and he's made a name for himself. Okay, and then there is a group that the Bureau is interested in. Well, what they would like for him to do then is use his rep from the other group to deal with it.
What do you base your conjecture or your statement that FBI operations and surveillance is more extensive today than it ever was? Why would there be? There doesn't seem to be the kind of organizations that existed in the 60s. Why would there be an even greater surveillance on the part of the government?
Well, you have to look at it from the standpoint that the Bureau looks at it. And to them, organization, no organization, as long as there's one or two people or a handful of people that still think in the molds of some of the groups in the 60s, then they will be watching them. You can believe it.
Then we moved into the area of budget, how the Bureau operates and manages its money.
The FBI has holdings in different companies. They have storefronts, businesses.
Wait a minute now. Why would they have holdings in companies, stock holdings in companies?
It's extra money.
Oh, you mean they get such a big budget and they may not use it in a particular year, so they invest in the stock market?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. The Bureau could, if federal funding was cut off to the Bureau right now, it could still go at full budget, I guess, for the next, 5, maybe 6 years.
Is it for this reason that the FBI has been able to stand up against many other government agencies?
You have to understand the person that started the Bureau and his background, J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar made an agency that was answerable to nobody but J. Edgar. There hasn't been a president that would dare call the FBI out on the carpet. Why?
Why?
Number one, just like they do background or surveillance on us, I suspect they do it to quite a few people up there in the Capitol. Senators, presidents, vice presidents. Everybody's got a skeleton in his closet.
And on top of that, he's rendered the FBI financially independent.
Yes. The allotments for their budget has grown bigger and bigger with each year. While I was in the Bureau for 7 years, the budget grew bigger and bigger. It's a thing that the monies not spent are always sent back to the government. Okay, but if you notice, the Bureau never sends any money back. Never. It uses its total budget, which is almost unheard of, except for the CIA, and they do the same thing. I guess being super patriots, they always had to figure that someday maybe the government might become corrupt with communists and leftists and black and communists and minorities and whatever.
This is the tyranny that the so-called Constitution talked about, and why we should have militias in every city, in every state, in the event that the government becomes tyrannical. Now, this government is so tyrannical now, and the people refuse to rise up against it. When you have people so-called rising up or suggesting that we do, we really have to be mindful, because they'll probably, instead of taking care of business and being prepared to go against a tyrannical government, they'll probably have us doing something illegal, and then everybody will be busted, instead of just organizing, strategizing, and deputizing.
And that the FBI would have to function on its own bravely by itself. So J. Edgar Hoover had the foresight to make sure that the FBI would have a little nest egg around so it could conquer these subversives,
And work west. What groups did you infiltrate in New York?
In New York, it was the Black Panther Party, Queens section.
How far into the organization did you get, and how'd you do it?
What I did was, I was a member of the party already in the California area. All I did was travel up and say I was checking out the party in the Queens area. What happened was, though, I only stayed with that assignment for 2.5 days. We found out then that it was infiltrated heavily by the New York Police Department.
And there was no need for your services.
There was no need for my services.
Let's go back to the 60s. In the first interview, you touched on the fact that you were involved in some way in the robbery of arms from the armory Weapons from the Armory.
Yes.
Give us the details and what just went down.
What happened was that the Black Liberation Army, was in need of weapons. This was relayed to my supervising agent.
By you?
By me. Okay. He said, well, why don't you go back to them and tell them that you have a plan to get some weapons?
What year was this incident?
Jesus, I don't really remember.
Okay.
All right. I don't really remember. It was early 70s. I know that. What happened was, well, I didn't live that far from the Compton Armory. It was right up the street. And what the plan was that I laid out to him, that on parade day, they only had one guard at the armory, and it would be very easily to go in there and get the weapons.
What role did the Bureau play in allowing you access or to facilitate access to rip off these arms?
Oh, they worked out the whole thing. They made sure that that there were no guards, except for, I think it was there one guard? I think there was one. No, there wasn't. There wasn't anybody, as a matter of fact. That was the thing that kind of made me nervous about the whole thing, because I said, damn, you're supposed to have, it looks kind of phony when you go to an armory on a military base.
The FBI made sure that he had access to the guns. And not only that, they have a budget that is unlimited. So they probably paid the soldier off to go take a walk or something.
That's located near the Compton Watt area, and there's no guard in there with the weapons?
This is by day or by night?
This happened during the day.
What time of day? Morning?
No, it was late afternoon.
So what happened? You went into the armory via, how did you get in?
What we did was...
How many?
It was 6 of us all together.
Okay.
And we cut there was a chain with a lock. We cut the chain, opened the gate, shimmied on in, got over to where the armory was, opened the door, nobody was there, took the weapons and split. But the thing about it was the firing pins were taken out of the 16, the firing pins were taken out of the 60 caliber machine guns. The grenade launchers, they were ready, no doubt. They were in A1. Nothing had been tampered with them. I couldn't understand that.
Why would the Bureau be interested in collaborating to allow the theft of these weapons, so that knowing that they were going to go to the SBA or the BLA?
Well, it's like this.
SLA, I'm sorry.
Well, there's a thing called a controlled situation. And what is meant by controlled situation is that you know who has what and what they intend to do with it. Then also you can also have someone or something where you can exert a little pressure to make sure that they do such and such a thing. They don't deviate. And the Bureau was very into controlled situations.
So in other words, when they got these weapons, they could then be goaded or lured into getting into some activity that would make them vulnerable.
I'm going to leave this right here. I didn't want to play it because it's over 2 hours long. I'm going to come back to it at a later date. And I want to thank everyone for joining me this evening. I appreciate it. And I hope that this information was pertinent to us and giving us awareness of the agents and confidential informants. They're very patient and they'll go deep undercover to get their desired effects. And it's who we least expect. Peace. Like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment in the comment section. Peace.
Get your copy of Fire. It's definitely a must-read. If you enjoy hood books, this one is it. Just like the title of the book, it's officially fire. Get it on Amazon, paperback or Kindle.